Hello to viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're going to talk about Sigma 24-70 f2.8 art 2 lens. I'm reasonably sure all of you have already heard about it. So what is this puppy? Well, this is 24-70 f2.8, meaning this is a part of the Holy Trinity lens. And Holy Trinity lens has generally three lenses, one ultra wide, which nobody ever talks about. Another is 24-70 f2.8. Another is 70-200 f2.8. Now the idea is, back in the film days, we had a very clear cut reality where it was like prime lenses for quality, zoom lenses for convenience. It was very clear. So if you are a generalist, you are always going to take basically zoom lenses, and if you are like portraiture photographer, you're always going to take prime. However, with the development of this sort of aperture, wide aperture in that sort of range, basically f2.8 at 24-70, like enough range, people started to focus, gravitate toward that. And as the quality became good, the reality was that if you have these three lenses, remove the first one, for some reason people's Holy Trinity has three lenses, but if you had 24-70 f2.8, 70-200 f2.8, likelihood of you needing any other prime lenses were almost zero. Now, of course, if you have niche cases, that's a different thing. But in most scenario, if you have these two lenses, you're sorted, you're golden. So this Holy Trinity lens is something that the moment a camera company comes into the market, that's the first thing they release. Look into Panasonic. Panasonic jumps in and it's like, okay, now we have full frame offering, our new lineup. What's the first lens they do? Holy Trinity lenses. Look into Z mount, Nikon Z mount. Look into Canon RF mount. Look into Sony E mount. The moment a company jumps in, that's the first lenses kit they release, the Holy Trinity lens. So this, what we are talking about, is Mark II of the E mount lens. Now be mindful, this lens is available in L mount and E mount. So here we are talking about E mount. Now optically it will remain the same, but features will be unlocked in L mount. I'll explain that further. Now you have to understand, when Sony came into the market, they released 24-70 f2.8 Mark I. Of course, they had to do it. That was the first lens. It was not good. Now I do not know how many of you are old enough, but like 10-15 years ago, this was a theme around the market where it's like, you're gonna buy Sony body in the future and Canon lenses with adapter. Now, why the heck nobody was talking about Nikon? Yeah, Nikon was not drive-by-wire. Canon was. So it was quite easy to communicate between Nikon, basically DSLR lens, to Sony mirrorless lens. Because flat out, the Sony's first batch of lens that they released was like, this was really like, and it was expensive AF. So it was really not that good. It was costly, it was not good, and it was like really bad. However, Sigma came to save, and Sony was wise enough back in that state. They were like, hey, here it's gonna take a while. Be mindful, Nikon and Canon both have century of experience. So does Fuji, almost close to a century of experience, where they're like, yeah, we know how to make optics. So competing with them directly, yeah, it's not going to happen. You're going to need Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV to actually beat them. So Sigma had the advantage. They're like, hey, we actually know how to make lenses specifically for this specific purpose. So they came around with the Mark I variant of that. It was good. It was cheap. It actually made Sony very successful. And people are like, awesome. Let's not even talk about this. Let's buy this. Look at the reviews of this. At that time when it was launched, it was like, shut up, buy this, done. It was very successful. However, Sony took it personally. People were too much insulting to them, like Sony does not know how to make glass. So they started to refresh their lineup, of course, which was expected, Mark II series. And this time they made this puppy. Now let me be very clear. This is not a lens. This is a good lens. What does that mean? That's what you buy this. If you're complaining about the output, you are doing something, or you may have defective piece. Other than that, nothing else happens. This lens is genuinely, it's like some engineer took it very personally. It's like, oh really? Oh really? You do not like it? Let me bitch slap RF mount lens. And they did. Like, that's the shocking part. It's actually like, you do side-by-side comparison in almost all, again, removing the color signature part of it, because color signature is always emotional. It's not scientific. But everything that you can scientifically test, like how much pin cushion distortion it has, how much barrel distortion it has, all those scientific things, how much brightness it has from, like, corner to corner, sharpness corner to corner. This was like, damn. And it is light. It is light. It's expensive AF, but yes, this time it's like, I'm light and I'm awesome. So people were like, whoa. Everybody started to buy this. This is unlocked lens. So Sigma was like in a scenario where it's like, we gotta do something. So they released Mark II. Now, how do you tell them apart? Because again, names are very close to each other, and because of the long name, you may make a mistake. If you find aperture ring, it's Mark II. It's a Mark II theme, apparently. Sony is like any Mark II lens, they put aperture ring to differentiate them. So Sony updated, and so did Sigma did. Sony's lens, as of now when I'm recording this video in India, this is like 1,75,900 rupees. Expensive puppy. and sigma is 1,12,000. So there is a significant gap between these two lenses. Now, if I'm not mistaken, in the Western world and other places, the gap is exactly 50%. Here it's not exact 50%, but close enough. So this is expensive lens, but this is like buy it and do not worry about it. But again, majority of people cannot just eat this kind of money. It's very expensive. So Sigma just released Mark II to compete against this Mark II. So what about the details here? Well, detail is very simple. Again, the biggest differentiation that you will notice day one is the aperture ring. Another is when Sigma released it, they kind of messed up one part of the assembly of the lens. So they were getting a lot of dust complaint in the Mark 1 variant. Now they fixed it. They refreshed it, like basically later batches did not have that issue. They find the problem, they fixed it. It was good, awesome. But here's a lot of people got bad taste in their mouth because of that. So this time they're like, okay, let's specifically focus on make sure that this is actually expensive lens. So they want to make sure that this lens is not like oops. So they have worked on that. They have aperture ring. Now they have high response linear actuator. Now this puppy allows the lens to focus very quickly, near to infinity, as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, Sony will not allow that wing to come out. I'll explain that. But it should be far more accurate. So meaning if the algorithm catches your eye, the lens should be like, I got you, fam. Because be mindful, Sony cameras are fast. How fast? Some of those cameras are reaching a point of 120 hertz at focusing correction. 120 hertz, meaning a signal goes to the sensor calculates it, a new signal is sent to the lens, correction of that, basically feedback of that lens, that all of those cycle happens 120 times a second. So you do need a lens that can move very fast, because this was another limitation of Fujifilm. Fujifilm, while they upgraded their body very quickly, but they were still stuck with the old ancient lens design. Those lenses were just not fast enough to allow the focusing to work. So that is why you will hear people talk like they're upgrading the lens. Even though for you and I, it's like, dude, aren't they good enough? Yeah, they're good enough, but they're not sticky enough. That's why we are still working our ass off on the lens mechanism, because we want it to be like, I get this. 120 hertz. Imagine future lenses where it's like 140 hertz or maybe 200 hertz. 200 times a second is like high speed camera autofocus. So that is why they had to upgrade that. Now, would you notice it? Little bit, but do not expect night and day whoa difference. What about sound and all that? The Mark 1 was also actually very good. So Mark 2 will not be like whoa. It's like better. Smaller and lighter. This puppy is 735 grams. Now let that be very clear. This is the big part. It's like, you're like, that's only a little bit lighter. Yeah, that's the whole thing. If you have a camera that you have to carry, let's say in a wedding scenario where you will be walking with that camera for a day, yeah, every gram that you can save matters a lot. Trust me, as you get older, that matters ludicrously lot. So that sort of weight saving, GG. Another aspect is the filter diameter. Thankfully, Sony's whole Trinity lineup is locked at that 82mm film, meaning you can have lenses from whatever have you, and all of them will be compatible with each other. That's good. And f22 is the minimum aperture, as you can see with this. So these are the core details. So what were the performance? Let this be very clear. You can get very close for macro. That's the biggest standout feature. It's like object, this is how close you can go. Like you can almost touch it. Be mindful if you are actually doing it, slow down the aperture a lot, meaning f8 plus, because again, it has way too much diffraction at the, not diffraction, color fringing at that point in time. But you can get very close. So that's there. Now, what about color rendition? That's what you are actually paying for in lens. So because again, you can make a scientifically awesome lens. That's not an issue. NASA does that every year. It's just that problem is it may not look pleasant, and we are paying for looking pleasant to human eye. So this lens, by all review, by all metrics, is good, rich, and these photos I have directly downloaded. I looked into my computer, full screen, full everything, and it's good. So you're not gonna have any issue where it's like, you know what, like Tamron is apparently unknown for this reason. They have blue tinge. So all of the photographs are really, really good. It does have heavy distortion. Now, to be expected, when you're going from 70 to 200, that's like this much deviation in angle you have to do. A lens can handle that. But when you're going from 24 to 70, it's like this to this. It's a lot of basically angle shrinking, so you will have distortion. Can we compensate that in optics? Yes, you can do that, but lens vehicle like this. That's why cinema lenses are huge, and that's why TV lenses are even more huge. That's the reason for that. because they have a counter compensation mechanism. Basically, there is a whole another lens, floating elements that are just compensating for your movements. Oh, you have zoomed in, okay, let me compensate for that. That's how they are making sure the field distortion is as minimal as possible. But when you're talking about photography lens, it has to be small and compact and cheap, so there are some sacrifices. Should you have to worry about it? No, unless you go disable all of the automatic correction, you will never even see it unless you physically disable it. Is that happens in all lenses? Yes, some has less, some has more, but it is always there, especially in 24 to 70, because like that's the problem. So camera has correction to handle it. Now chromatic aberration is also very low, but it's there. You have to remember, especially in macro, let that be very clear. If you're doing macro, stop the aperture, slow it down, go f8. So this is the performance side of it. It's really good. So question becomes, for whom this is made? Yeah, if you are a hobbyist, if you are like jumping into photography, you want to do it, and either you are an enthusiast, here's deal. For them, shut up by this, because here's deal. G Master Mark II lens, this one is actually a good lens, even better in some regards, but it does not justify its price. It's expensive AF, so it just not justify its price. However, if you are a low budget professional, like if you are just starting into photography, just don't have money for it, yeah, you can still buy this. It's not, you're not going to regret it. However, let me be very clear. If you're a professional, if you're like, hey, should I buy this or Sony? If that kind of deal you're happening with yourself, where it's like, hey, I could choose any of them, always choose Sony. The reason for that is, of course, it's a bit of a sloppy reason, but it is a real reason where a camera company places limits on third-party lenses. Canon has flat out blocked it, and yes, it's still blocked. All they have did is like, okay, anybody can make RF APS-C lens. They cannot make RF full frame lens. So Sony, because again, the early days they were very bad in lens. They had the wisdom. They're like, okay, anybody can make it, but there were limitation. For example, back in that day, the limitation was placed at 15 FPS. Now you have to understand, this was ancient, like 10, 11 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So that time, even 2 frame per second, 4 frame per second, 5 frame per second was like, whoa. So nobody was like, 15 was like, well, who cares? And another aspect is, a lot of advanced functions are disabled. For example, if you have this puppy, Sony G Master 2, you can go 120 FPS. If you put this puppy, you are limited to 15. So if you upgraded your camera body in the future, be mindful, you're not going to upgrade the camera body right now, but camera body we switches out way too regularly. And 5 years from now, I'm reasonably certain that we're going to have 30 FPS as a normal basic level function. Because be mindful, Sony has already released a camera right now that is in market that touches 120 FPS. So that becomes a limit. Another aspect is a video function. Let's say you are doing a lot of video, because again, the lens is small and compact, it does suffer from the focus breathing. Be mindful, Sigma also suffers it. It's little, but not zero. To compensate for that, Sony released a software solution where they're like, okay, because we are always capturing most of the time more than 4K, so they are capturing 4.5K, 6K, downscaling to 4K, and then giving the file. They're like, what if we take that as a buffer? So in that buffer, they crop in directly. So benefit, you lose a field of view, little bit of field of view, but you do not have to worry about it. And it's an electronic communication back and forth between your camera and the lens. It can be done in all lenses. It's just Sony has like, that feature is locked to all Sony lenses. So you cannot do that with third party. That's why I'm very clear. If you are a professional photographer who's getting into this field, biting the bullet for this lens may be a better long-term solution. You do not want to be in a scenario where 5 years from now, you, let's say, looked out and somebody is selling their A1 and it's like, awesome, I'm going to put it, it's like, oh, I cannot actually get 120 frame per second. I'm only going to get 15 frame per second. Yeah, that time it's going to sting. All the money saved will be like, phew. So for those who are professional people, if you are discussing between these two, try to get Sony. I know it's expensive. I know it's unfair from Sony, but how can I compare? Because Nikon is like, bro, any lens that you release must be not available from first party. That's why Sony Nikon lens is so weird. Like, look into Z mount available lenses. It's like, why you have this sort of weird lenses? It cannot be like, cannot allow competition. Sony at least have the ideas like, hey, Tamron, they directly bought the company, stakes in the company. So they're like, hey, do not make direct lens. Sigma, they can make it, but again, they will have limitations. And be mindful, Tamron also has that limitation, 15 FPS and all that. But at least you have options. Nikon is just like weird. Canon is like, nope. So in that reality, this is awesome. The only place where you can see the full feature of this lens is L mount Alliance. Good luck if you have that system. So let me be very clear, because lenses are far longer terms investment, it would be wise for many people to buy this lens, and you can get more work. And you really do not want to be in a position where it's like, oops, I saved a little bit in my past and now I'm stuck with it. You do not want that. So for professional people, for enthusiasts, hobbyists, go YOLO on it. And be mindful, this lens has actually less distortion. So meaning the correction that is being done is also very less, and it does play a little bit of role. You do not have to worry about in photo, but in video it does affect a little bit. So this is genuinely good lens, but the price is like, ooh. So for whom, I hope this clarified it. If you are a professional, you are going into this field, save up money and buy for this, so you do not be limited by your future, where it's like, oops, because I have this limitation. For everybody else, buy the Sigma lenses and you're gonna have a fun time with it, and your pocket will be awesome. So this was my presentation on basically Sigma Holy Trinity f2.8 24 to 70 millimeter lens. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please hit the like button, share it amongst a friend. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.